My name is Tina Fallon, real estate agent here at Realty Collective. And the reason I joined Realty Collective is because when Victoria Alexander formed the company back almost 20 years ago, she did so with the idea that there ought to be a company that defies the stereotypes about real estate. There's very few businesses that are viewed as negatively as that of a real estate agent. And I love working for one that is looking to defy those stereotypes. We're not just here to sell your home and to open a door and take your money. We are basically your coach, your therapist, and your sounding board to help you through the emotional roller coaster of selling in New York City. And we try to make it as low stress as possible. One of the ways we do that is by introducing you to and here's my okay, to smart and effective people who can help you through your process. That includes real estate agents like Rashida Sadiq, who will be joining us shortly. We will also share with you a helpful guide with a timeline so that you have an idea of how the process of selling in Brooklyn will break down. Although we will get to this in a little bit, there is no set timeline, and we like to work with our clients to give them whatever it is that they need and to work with the timeline that works for them. So just because we have a standard timeline doesn't mean that you have to adhere to it. We just like to know ahead of time and give you a sense of the not so standard is. So let's talk about selling in Brooklyn. If you're considering selling now, as you've probably been following in the news, rates are coming down, which is really great time to be selling, and prices are still up year over year. And there's lots of reasons to sell in New York. We really encourage people to hang on to their property as long as they can. But if you have to move to a bigger space or alternately downsize out of your space, if you have a home that is a certain kind of property that buyers are really looking for, if you're in a neighborhood that is in high demand, or if you have a property type that is in high demand, it's always a good time to sell. And if it would be sad for us, but if you're planning on leaving New York City so you can swap the high cost of living here for a lower cost of living someplace else, for example, now is a really good time to be selling. Rates, this big rate cut that we just had last week, is actually a huge factor, and we're seeing a lot of buyers come back into the market for this fall buying season. And if you're ready to sell to them, the timing is much better than it was, say, 4 months ago or even a year ago. So good on you. So if you are considering selling, some of the things that we want you to think about before you even reach out to a real estate agent is, what are the factors that are going to make a big difference for you as a seller? Again, as I said, we do recommend people hold on. If you can buy and hold in New York, it's the best way to maximize the return on your investment in your property. So if you've been hanging on to your property for a long time, good for you. But the market has been in a constant state of flux for the past few years. As coming out of COVID, we had a huge uptick in interest in buying, especially as interest rates started to rise and there was a kind of a musical chairs intensity around buyers finding property before those rates went up. Then the rates got quite high and the buyers backed off quite a bit, and we saw longer time on market for properties. Although as interest rates go down and rents are staying the same as they are, people are really taking a look at that difference between what does it cost for me to own and what does it cost for me to rent, and it's a little bit more favorable to you as a seller at this point. So if you have a property that is priced correctly and positioned well, it's a great time for you to be selling. And I would say it's better than it was. It's better than it's been for the past couple of years. It's a really good moment for sellers. So looking ahead to your considerations, a big factor is, have you held your property long enough? So we talk about this break-even horizon for many property holders in New York, because the closing costs associated with both buying and selling are so high that it takes roughly 5 years, even with the kind of inflation that we've been seeing and the kind of increases in property values that we always see in New York. It takes about 5 years to be able to recoup all of those expenses and start to see a profit on your sale. You may have to sell at a loss for whatever reason, but we say a like good rule of thumb is if you've had it for roughly 5 years. We'll also go through and dig through your specifics to see if that's a factor for you. You don't want to sell until you're making money. Let's make sure you've hit your break-even horizon and exceeded that. If you're considering trading up and you purchased a home when interest rates were at 2.7%, and now we're seeing them at 5.7%, it may be challenging to trade up. As I mentioned, prices have continued to rise in spite of the fact that interest rates are higher and money is more expensive to borrow. If you are looking to trade up from, say, a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, and you're currently paying an interest rate of 2.7%, that 3% jump to something new might wipe out the potential gains from the sale of your home. So if there's a way that you can stay put, if you're looking at that kind of a scenario, we can put in a temporary wall, make your 1-bedroom into a 2-bedroom. Those are all things that we want to make sure that you have factored in before you decide to sell. I guess it's probably obvious, but we do not pressure people to sell at Realty Collective. For some folks, it's not the right time. And if you have an alternative that can enable you to keep building equity for a longer period of time, that's something we want you to take into consideration as you're making your decision. Sellers generally will have roughly 7 to 8% in closing costs at the time that you sell. And Rashida, if she was to join us, she'll go back a little bit more deeply into what those closing costs are, but they include the transfer taxes. If you're in a co-op, you may have a flip tax. Some condos even have flip taxes. There's paying off your mortgage if you have an underlying mortgage. There's a realtor commission, which we'll discuss a little bit more in a little bit. Any potential capital gains that you have, those are not factored into your 7 to 8%, and you do not need to pay your capital gains at closing. The rest of these you do. And then there's other fees that are factored in. You'll pay your real estate attorney. There's sometimes additional recording fees that you have to pay to the various companies that are involved in the closing process. In addition to the fees that you paid when you purchased, there's that additional 7 to 8% in closing costs to look at when it's time to sell. So that for a lot of people can take a big bite out of your potential profit. That's my dog. Is your property what people are looking for? So a big factor in your profit is are you meeting the market with the home that you have? So we have seen buyers in the past few years, I think maybe Instagram is to blame for this, but buyers are really looking for renovated homes. I think there was a lot of fear around the cost of renovation and the timelines associated with renovation that came up out of COVID and out of we've seen a lot of increases in labor costs and increases in the cost of materials. And so a lot of folks do not want to get involved in a renovation, particularly if they're going to have to carry the home for a period of time. So if you have a home that is nicely renovated or can be made to look in move-in condition, those are things that buyers are going to take very seriously. If you have desirable amenities, if you're in a building with an elevator and a doorman, if you have parking as a big feature, location is always a factor in New York City. So if you're in a neighborhood people really want to belong to, or if it's a neighborhood that people don't want to leave, that's something that can be huge for them. And then if you've got some ability to work from home. So since COVID, we're definitely seeing an increase in buyers who are looking for a space where they may be able to have a home office. Your timing considerations. So what's your timing? Do you need to be able to sell before you buy something else? Do you have something else in mind that you're ready to purchase? Is it something where you want to be in contract here before you buy something else? And so you want to be able to have a little bit more time to find your next home. These are all things that that are factors for you as a seller, and they're also factors for buyers as well. Your flexibility on those terms is something that's going to alter the buyer pool for you. Outdoor space, huge. People love outdoor space. They love private outdoor space. They're willing to do shared outdoor space, and proximity to, say, Prospect Park is a big factor. So people like to be able to get outside. They want to be able to do it from the comfort of their home. School performance, which is something that we do not discuss with buyers, but is something that is absolutely a factor for buyers when they're considering their next home. And then also multifamily versus single families. We've definitely seen an increase in the number of people who are looking for two-family homes as opposed to single-family homes, because the additional cost of carrying a property is something that they want to potentially offset with income from a rental. For a long time, we were looking at the high-end buyers were really looking for single-family homes. They did not want to be landlords. We've definitely seen a little bit of a move towards a two-family home in the Brooklyn space. So those are all things that are factors that are going to determine what your sale price is for your home, what your listing price is, what your sale price is, if it's not exactly the same as your listing price, and also the time on market. If you're well priced in a neighborhood that people love with amenities that people are looking for, then the sale of your home may move quite quickly, which is one of the reasons why we want to make sure that you are fully prepared to sell your home before we put it on the market publicly. So to that end, do you have a plan for after you sell? So we want to help you avoid seller's remorse. We definitely don't want you to sell your home for less than you need to get out of it. We also don't want to sell your home and leave you homeless. So we want to make sure you have a plan for where you're going next. So we look at this as a transition where we're helping you get from point A to point B. And point B is you're settled in your new home, in your new life. And along the way, there is a transaction in which we sell your current home. But the transaction for us is not the end. It's just part of the journey. And we really want to make sure we know where you're headed before we put together a marketing plan for your home. So if it's something where you know that you need to be able to stay in your home, say for a couple of weeks after the closing, so that you have time for that money to get into your account and you can complete the purchase of something else. Let's talk about that beforehand so that we know that's what you're looking for. Your buyers know that's what you're looking for. The attorneys involved in the deal understand that's what we're looking for. And we don't end up, say, accepting an offer from somebody who needs to close in 30 days in cash when that doesn't give you enough time to find your next home. And there's also always the possibility if somebody's going to give you cash in 30-day closing that you might say, oh, you know what? I'll rent for a little while. I'm fine evacuating my home because I will get this. I have an offer that I really can't refuse. That's also something else to take into consideration as well. And so we really want to work with you to determine what your tolerances are around all of these different possibilities. If you know you have a sort of bottom line number, what is the number that you're willing to sell for? And we get offers that are, let's say, below that number. You're also not required to accept one of those prices. So if somebody is offering you $100,000 less than you're asking, it's the only offer you get, you do have the option to take the home off the market for a period of time. You can move and rent the apartment out if you're not in a co-op, but if you're in a co-op where you've been for multiple years, you may still have that option there. So we never want you to feel like you are trapped into a sale that doesn't give you what you need to get from point A to point B. So, and then in terms of timing, so it can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months to sell. So if it's something where you're thinking about selling next year and you feel like, oh, I'm really a little early in this process, we're happy to talk you through that process. The sooner, the better. The more lead time that we have to do a lot of the analysis that your attorney might want to do and that your agents might want to do. So we want to check and make sure that, for example, there's no open violations on the home. There's no surprise liens on the property. We want to make sure that there are no unpleasant surprises that are going to await you. If there's something that needs to be fixed, if your HVAC system is on the fritz a little bit, or maybe if your hot water heater is near the end of its usable life, there might be some things that you want to address before you put the home on the market, just because it's going to help you achieve a higher number when you do sell. So these are all factors that are worth considering. It's going to take 4 to 6 months to sell. If we've got 4 to 6 months to help prep you for sale, that's better for us. The more time, the better. Then again, if you suddenly are being relocated to a new location and you need to turn it around right now this month. Also good to know, we can turn things around really quickly as well. You've taken into consideration all of these factors and you've decided to sell. The first step for any sale process is to assemble your team. So you're going to need in New York State, even if you decide not to use a real estate agent, you're going to need a real estate attorney. So if you're familiar with some of the changing rules that have been happening around agency in the United States, there are and have always been options for sellers who choose not to use a real estate agent. So if you want to do for sale by owner, you're still in New York State going to need a real estate attorney, a New York State and a New York City real estate attorney. That's really in many ways the most important person on your team to get ahead of time. Excuse me. So you definitely want to get a chance to interview some people. We will include a link with some questions of what to ask a real estate attorney. We'll also include a link for what to ask a real estate agent. But if you do choose to work with a real estate agent, do make sure that they are experts in your property. So that can be experts in your property type. If you're selling a multifamily building, you don't want somebody who has only ever sold condos and co-ops. A multifamily building is a different scenario. If you are selling a vacant lot, you want somebody who understands how to sell that. It's also very helpful to have somebody who understands your neighborhood and the specific market that your neighborhood includes. We do a lot in Brooklyn. We do a lot all over Brooklyn. If I'm doing a deal as a listing agent in Manhattan, for example, sometimes I'll team with another agent who is more of a Manhattan expert. Oh, and here's Rashida. I'm so glad you're here. But you definitely want to have somebody who knows your market, and you want somebody who you feel comfortable with. I think this is enormously important. Somebody who you feel communicates with you in the way you want to be communicated with. Someone who, like Rashida, will let you push your meeting to 4:30, even if it means she's going to have to be a little bit late for her Zoom call. You want somebody who's going to go above and beyond to serve your needs as a client. And I'm going to hand it over to Rashida because we have her here. And I don't know if you can hear in the background, I actually have to take my dog outside for a second. So I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to Rashida. Unless Rashida's, are you
Hi,
first? Oh,
everyone.
there you are.
There I am. And I'm so apologize for being late. And I may have the internet has been unstable. Fortunately, I think the gremlins with me this afternoon. But yes, my name is Rashida Sadiq. I've been practicing for 20 plus years, doing real estate law, and hopefully here to give you tips as a seller, especially in this market, what you should be looking out for and preparing documents and things like that. And I see we're on now where you're assembling your team, and Tina is talking about what needs to be done. So your attorney, as a seller's attorney, basically, once you have an offer, the realtors will send to your attorney the deal sheet. And the role of your attorney is to prepare that draft contract of sale, negotiate the terms of the contract of sale, as well as making sure that the down payment that the buyer is given is going to be held in an attorney escrow account. So you want to make sure that you do have an attorney that is actually a real estate attorney. Because it is a special IOLA account that you must have for real estate transactions. The attorney hopefully is very knowledgeable about whether it's a co-op, a condo, or a house, because there are certain things that the attorney needs to do as far as reviewing the title search, making sure that you have particular documents that are necessary for the closing. So that's the role of your attorney. I'm trying to see where Tina was at this point, but yeah, open for questions as we go along with the process. And as we talk about preparing yourself as well for documents you start to put together.
Hi. Sorry about that. Just hopping back into choosing to work with an agent. So something that has, as we mentioned, has happened recently is that there's been a change in the way brokers are compensated in New York. And so basically what happened previously is that we, as your sales agent, would split our commission with the broker that is representing your buyer. And that came about in the 1990s with the birth of the buyer's agent. The idea being that a buyer deserves to have someone whose fiduciary responsibility is to them, as our fiduciary responsibility is to you as a seller. I actually still think it's a smart consumer protection to make available, but there's some confusion over who pays the buyer's agent at this point. So there is a kind of convention in New York still for the seller to compensate the buyer's agent with a kind of finder's fee. But if that is something that is negotiable, has always been negotiable, but is now more or more obviously negotiable, I guess I could say. And it's something that we would want to discuss prior to listing the property. If you would like to be able to offer a finder's fee to a buyer's agent, just knowing that is something that is going to attract more buyers or more capable buyers. The other possibility is that you don't offer that. And then when the buyers make their offers, then in the new system, the buyer's agent can request that compensation at the time that they're submitting the offer. So it is something that's new. It's something that's still working its way through the system. And we will talk that through with you to make sure that you are comfortable with whatever it is that we are offering. If you are offering commission to the agent, and if not, and then what the ramifications of that are. So that's a new piece that is really worth discussing early on. And if you have other friends who have been listing or selling in current or recent markets, getting a sense of how they interacted with buyers who were represented versus buyers who were not, it's worth talking through. And so we don't want to rush you into it, and we don't want you to feel blindsided by that conversation. So it's a good thing to have sooner rather than later. All right, let's get into soliciting buyers. You found your real estate attorney. You've determined that your home is ready to be sold, and you are working with an agent to market the home. The way we work is that we start by saying, what's the story that you're telling? So ideally, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, the story that you're telling is you have a beautiful, renovated, desirable home that is exactly what buyers are looking for. They don't have to lift a finger. It's in the neighborhood they want to be in. It's great. But it is also possible that you have a home that maybe needs a little bit of work. So we want to make sure that we are telling the consistent story so that we're attracting the right buyers. If you have a broker who has only ever sold new construction condominiums, and you're selling your grandmother's house in ancient Victorian in Flatbush that hasn't been updated since the 1940s, that person may not be able to speak to the special qualities of your home. You really want someone who can enthusiastically sell your home and do so with real kind of authority to make buyers feel comfortable. So if the story that you're telling is, this is my grandmother's house and it is precious and it is ready for its next buyer to come in and renovate it and restore it to its original quality, you don't want to pretend that house is turnkey. So you don't want to do virtual staging that shows some kind of fake renovated version of that home, because when the buyers show up, they're going to be confused by it. So we really avoid virtual staging almost always, because you really want the photographs that you take of the home, the story that you tell about the home, the floor plans that you have for the home. You want them to match what the buyer is going to experience when they show up, because they're going to fall in love with those pictures. And if they show up at your home and it doesn't look like the pictures, they're going to turn around and walk away. So we really want to be clear in our description of the home. We don't want to misrepresent the home, and we want to tell that story as engagingly and enticingly as we possibly can. Okay, and then we're considering offers. So we've done that, and we have the first open house, and we've done everything that we need to get the home ready. So we have cleaned it, and then our company, we actually do include staging free of charge to our sellers in most cases. I do recommend it. I think it's great. Sometimes it's a blend of our staging furniture and your own furniture. Sometimes you declutter and move your things out beforehand. I know I'm going back to that part, but it's something that we really want to optimize your home for sale. And so sometimes it means you move some of your stuff out for your final move, and we move some of our things in. But we've attracted all of these great buyers. They show up, and you get an offer after your first open house, maybe that day, maybe the next day. And let's say that offer comes in a little bit low. We say always counter every offer. I like to negotiate every single offer to get it as good as it possibly can be when I'm presenting it to my sellers. So just because somebody offers low number, sometimes that's just their process. They want to make sure they can't get it for 20% under the asking price. So try not to be offended if an offer comes in low. Sometimes that's just the dance that the buyers want to do. So the person can come in 20% under the asking price and still end up being the highest bidder over time. You don't know what their process is. You don't want to second guess their process, and you don't want to be insulted by a low offer. You just want to keep everybody in the mix and counter even if an offer comes in low. That first offer, we recommend you take really seriously. So if it's somebody who has been outbid on another property, somebody who's looking for exactly this, they're not going to mess around. They're going to make an offer right away. And if you get an offer for the asking price right at that moment, sometimes you can feel like, oh no, we've underpriced it. But that might be the only offer you get on the property the whole time. Like that buyer, those serious engaged buyers who are prepared, who have their pre-approval ready, who bring you a beautifully filled out REBNY offer form that tells you what their length of their employment is and who they are and a little bit more about them. That might be your buyer. So do take that first offer really seriously. Don't think just because you got one great offer that there's going to be a million other ones coming in. Now, that said, if there is a long period of time in New York between an accepted offer and a signed contract, and a lot can happen during that period of time. So if just because we get to a point where we have an offer, we've negotiated it to be as good as we think it can be, we keep selling that, we keep showing that home. So even if you've accepted the offer and Rashida has sent the contracts out, we're going to keep showing for backup, because that buyer can walk away at any point before the contract signing without any repercussions. That said, you can also jump from that buyer to somebody else without any repercussions either. So let's say you accepted an offer that was a little below the asking price because it's been on the market for a little while and we just think this might be the best we can do. Somebody comes in with a higher offer. We may give that original buyer an opportunity to come up and meet that higher offer, but you are not under any obligation to stick with that buyer. That said, we do want to take people's time and energy seriously, and we don't want to toy with people, because if people feel turned off by this process, they may just disappear. And we want to keep everybody on the hook as long as we possibly can while they go through the process with your real estate attorney. So Rashida, what's that process like? We've accepted an offer. I put all the deal terms together and I send it to you. What happens next?
So yes, once I get that offer, that deal sheet, your attorney is going to prepare the draft contract of sale. So certain things that hopefully you have been in touch with your attorney in advance, so you can have it handy to send over to them as well. If you have a copy of your current, if it's a co-op and you have a copy of your current stock certificate and proprietary lease, your attorney's going to want to see that. Your attorney's probably going to also want to see your latest maintenance statement and your latest mortgage statement if you have a mortgage on the property, because certain information that's on the maintenance, what's on how your name appears on your stock certificate and your lease, goes into the contract of sale. If you have a condo, then your attorney may want to see a copy of the deed. If you have that, if you have your owner's policy for when you purchase the condominium or the house, your attorney may want that. So once again, because that prepares them for things that may come up in the future once you're in contract, or even assist them with making sure that they have the correct spellings of names on that contract of sale as well, because between the time when you purchased it, maybe you had a name change and things like that, that sometimes isn't reflected maybe on the deal sheet. So having your documents handy and available for your attorney would be great to have. But that deal sheet, the attorney will prepare, send it over to the buyer's attorney. If it's a co-op or a condo, the buyer's, you should also have the offering plan, the financials, the house rules for your building, which you may have already given to your agent. If you haven't, then you can always give it to your attorney and then they can pass it along as well. But just things that you should always get handy, because that deal sheet and that contract of sale goes out within typically either 24 hours from when that your attorney gets that deal sheet. And if there's missing information or they need to confirm the names are appear exactly on the stock certificate as they appear on that deal sheet on the contract of sale, there may be a lag. Attorney still waiting on documents from you to confirm information as well. I think they have violations. Your attorney typically may look up the property to see if there's any violations on the property, Department of Buildings, because the contract of sale will state that you have to give the property clear of any violations. We'll also look up to see if there's a mortgage on the property, because then we know that you have to pay off that mortgage at the day of the closing as well. So these are things that in advance, they may not necessarily go into the contract of sale, but it's handy for your attorney to have when they're sending out that contract of sale or negotiated the contract of sale.
And
now that, go ahead.
so I was just going to say that one of the terms that you will frequently find in a deal sheet is an inspection contingency. That is something that you want to get out of the way while the attorneys are in the early stages of drawing up this contract. So we really encourage the inspection to happen right away. We don't want it to be the last thing. Sometimes it is the last thing, but we don't want it to be the last thing. One of the things that we will note as we go through this entire process is that time is the deal killer. You do not want anybody waiting for you. You may find yourself impatiently waiting for the buyer to do something, but we don't want anybody to be waiting for us to come up with, oh, where are the house rules? Where's that document? And then with the inspection, it's something we do want to get done right away. Now, things may come up during the inspection. Most deals are as is sales and Rashida can tell us a little bit more about that, but that doesn't mean that people won't still try to renegotiate if something comes up in the inspection that, let's say, none of us really knew was going to happen. So sometimes you're showing something in the middle of winter and you have no idea whether or not you don't know when the last time the HVAC system was, or AC system was inspected, and the guy opens something up and finds some like mice living inside your air conditioning compressor. Nobody saw that coming, but that's something that we now need to address. And the sooner that we can respond to that, the better. It can be tempting to say, oh, you're just trying to renegotiate because you're just trying to get away with something, and therefore I'm going to wait for another buyer. The next buyer is going to find the mice as well. So we might as well deal with the mice right away. So we don't want time to kill your deal. Rashida, what is an as-is sale and what's included and what's not included?
As is a term that's in the contract of sale. So it states that the buyer has done their inspection of the property, they understand the condition of the property. So if something is working now when they did their inspection, that's in the as-is condition. So that means it has to be in working order on the day of the closing when they do their final walkthrough. If, let's say, the windows, they are old and they squeak and things like that, you don't have to replace all of the windows, because that's the as-is condition of the windows. They've done their inspection and they understand that the windows are old and they squeak. So that will fall under the as-is condition. So it's always important that, as I said, the buyer, when they do their inspection, if there's things that have to be fixed, they'll notify you and we'll put that in the contract of sale. But generally, as-is means when they did their inspection, you have to maintain the property through the day of the closing. So electrical, plumbing systems have to be in working order. They were in working order when they saw the property, when they did the inspection. They have to be in working order on the day of the closing. Something also now, that if you're selling a house as a seller, you have to fill out is a property condition disclosure statement. You may get it from your agent or you may get it from your attorney. That disclosure statement has to be filled out by the sellers now. It used to be an option, but now you have to fill it out. And it has to be provided to the buyer when the contract or sale goes out, for them to review. So even though the buyer has to rely on their inspection, and that clearly states that in the property condition disclosure statement, you still have to fill out this form, and it has things, questions about the condition of the property, how old is the roof, if there's any tenants of the property. And a lot of it you can say, I don't know, or not applicable. You don't have to do any kind of like dig in and research to find out answers. It's really to your actual knowledge. And a lot of times, as I said, sellers end up putting, they don't know because it's been many years or they just don't have that information. But it is a form that you do have to fill out now as a seller. So you should familiarize yourself with that form because it does go out with the contract or sale when you find that buyer.
Yeah, I think that's another thing. Again, it's a lot of it's 6 pages or something like that. And it'd be great to get that filled out in advance of the sale so that it's not something that you have a big day at work and you don't have time to attend to it. And now it's almost the end of the day on Friday and we can't get a signed contract because we don't have this disclosure form. Those are the kinds of delays we really want to help you avoid. So getting that done in advance and having time to really think through it as opposed to feeling rushed through any of this paperwork, that's really, I think, ideal. So we're moving forward to closing the deal. For you as a seller, really a lot of this work is on the buyers. The buyers are they're getting all their paperwork together. They are applying for their loan. They're getting an appraisal done on the property. So there's a lot of things that are happening on the buyer's side, but that doesn't mean you can just sit back and relax. At the time that you are selling the home, presumably you will have vacated it. And so that does take a lot of work on your part there. So once you're in contract, you can take a little bit of a break, but then it's important to remember that it's going to be time for you to move soon. So we can't really just rest. And then also, if there are any unresolved issues with the building, if you have an open permit that you forgot to close, or if you have a violation that needs to be attended to, those are things that your agent and your attorney can help you get through at that point too. So those are things that you've signed the contract with the caveat that those things are going to be addressed. We do then need to address them. So we want to get out right on top of that as we can. We don't push you too hard, but we do want to make sure that we get all that done so that you don't find yourself in the last 3 days before closing, suddenly rushed to get everything done. Rashida, what would you say about after we've got a signed contract, about how long on average does it take to close a deal?
Yeah, typically, if you're selling a house or a condo, you're looking at roughly a 60-day process. The main parts are the buyer probably takes roughly 30 to 45 days to get their mortgage. Also, simultaneously, they're having the title search done on the property, and barring any title issues that may come up, then it's title clearance and scheduling your closing. So roughly a house with a standard transaction, no major hiccups, you're looking at a 60-day closing. If it's a co-op, you're probably looking at more of a 60 to 90-day closing, particularly because the co-op has first the mortgage period, which is roughly 30 days. Then the buyer has to submit their application to the board for the board approval, and we're waiting on that. Then once they're approved by the board, then scheduling the closing. So as a seller, as I said, a lot of times you're just waiting, but you're typically 60 days if you're looking at a house or a condo, 60 to 90 days if you're looking at a co-op. And it's also important that those documents that I mentioned before, such as your owner's policy or your stock certificate and your lease, that comes into play as far as the closing timeframes as well, because your attorney as a seller, if you're selling your co-op, they have to get from your bank your original stock and lease
I lost you for a second there. I had a original stock and lease.
Old mortgage that's still on the property. Or as Tina mentioned, sorry? I think
No, I lost you there for a second. I can't tell if it's my internet, but you were
I
saying the
am
original stock
frozen.
and lease for this, for it. Okay, it wasn't me, it was Rashida. All right, so I will try to fill in a little bit of where she just left off. So really it's whichever kind of property. Oh, there she is. We
Sorry
there's the
about that.
specific paperwork for whatever type of property that you have that she needs to have on hand to be able to schedule the closing.
Yes, so sorry about that, but yeah, so once we have everything cleared, whether it's your the buyer's bank clearance and the title, your attorney has worked out all of the issues with the title clearance, then it's scheduling the closing. And as a seller, your part is roughly about 10, I'll say 20 minutes of signing potentially. So some sellers decide they don't want to attend the closing and they decide to give their attorney power of attorneys. So you'll have a conversation with your attorney regarding signing the power of attorney prior to signing. Or if you're still in New York and you want to pre-sign the documents and give those documents to your attorney, you can coordinate with your attorney in advance of the closing to pre-sign documents and give them a limited power of attorney for the closing date. Or you can attend the closing in person. It's really just going to be about your flexibility, your schedule, because there's various amount of people that have to be in attendance on that closing date. So sometimes it's easier for the seller to say, hey, I can't attend. I'll give you attorney. You'll deposit the funds in my account after the closing. The agent has the keys and everything's set to go. So you don't necessarily have to be there at the closing table itself.
Yeah, that's particularly key if you've already moved to another state, for example. You do not need to fly back to New York to do it. You just need enough time to make sure that you've got all the paperwork in order. You don't want to decide the day of that you need power of attorney. So I think getting back to the theme, just the more prepared we are, the smoother this can be for you and the least stressful possible. You have vacated your home. That's something that we're happy to help you with. It can be very stressful to move. We know that. So giving you time and assistance as you go through that process of moving out. Sometimes as you move out, you're like, oh, I moved that giant sideboard and I forgot that there was a huge hole in the wall behind it. Those are things that we need to address prior to that walkthrough if they weren't visible and noted during the inspection. So any additional time that you can give us. That said, we're really good at scrambling at the last minute to solve problems. So if you've just discovered a hole behind your wall, I've got people, we can fix that hole. If you have, for some reason, all of a sudden your dishwasher has stopped working, these are things that we can address for you. It's why you have an agent to help you with this. It's people say, what does an agent do? They just open a door. I will say that is the least of what we do. I think Rashida can tell you we're in the middle of doing a deal where I'm about to get a reimbursement check for the work that I did on my client's home because they're out of town and I had to be there to attend to it. And I was like, oh, my reimbursement is actually going to exceed my commission on this deal. I don't know if it will quite, but we're really willing to work hard. We think a lot of the combination of the labor that we can provide for you and the expertise that we provide for you is the value that we add to selling your home. And we work hard for it because we know that you can go with a different agent. You can sell on your own. You have a lot of different options. So we always want to make sure that we're providing you with a level of service that makes you feel at the end of the day that when you pay a commission fee to our company, that you've gotten more than the value that you're paying back out. So yes, rely on us, depend on us to get those things fixed for you and to address them. We have a great stable of plumbers, electricians, people who've got really good guys to fix sidewalk violations, for example. I can get your sidewalk violation cleared in 3 days. If you have something like that, no, it's true. Muhammad. 3 days. I don't know what his system is, but he is very fast. So please don't let any of the things that we've mentioned as being potential drags on your sale be a reason not to engage with an agent or an attorney. These are things that we can just help streamline for you and make it easier for you. Whatever your process is, however it is that whatever you need to sell, whatever your timeline is, we are here to tailor a marketing system for you and for your particular needs so that we can get you the most amount of money and in the timeline that works for you. Rashida, and I'll hand it back over to you. I'm
Yeah, I would
sorry that we
say
didn't
my
get you at the
final
very beginning.
thoughts, because this has been coming up a lot with sellers, is violations.
Oh, I just lost you again. I think Rashida's also got something else happening.
And I am still having the it's been one of those evenings. I'm sorry, my internet connection has been very unstable this evening. And I was going to say my final thought, because it's been coming up a lot with my sellers, are open permits, violations, and sidewalk violations. I think out of 10 deals, I probably have 8 of them with open permits, sidewalk, or violation. So as a seller, this is a good opportunity to speak with your agent or speak with an attorney and see if they can go on DOB or build our HPD to see if there's any open permits. If you did work, look through your records to make sure your contractor closed out any open permits that they have. Did you get a notice from the city about a sidewalk violation that you forgot about and now it's a year later and it's still there? So this is a good opportunity to do a deep dive into the actual title to some extent of what's on your property, because that has been coming up a lot with these old open permits and open violations and sidewalk violations as sellers.
Yeah, you really may not
And that's why it's
know.
important that you had this.
You may not know if you had work done and you pulled permits for it, and you may think that they were closed, and there might be something, just something really simple that needs to be signed off on, and you cannot. It's unlikely that you're going to be able to easily transfer your property to somebody with an open permit. I had a situation where my client realized that they had an open electrical permit, and the person who had done the work had passed away, and they had to find someone they had to drill down. This contractor had passed away. His electrician was still available. So we had to make sure we could find his subcontractor in order to get that work done. And heaven forbid something like that happen, but honestly, it happens every day. There's always something. And for us, sometimes it's, oh, there's something new. I haven't encountered that before. It's always an adventure for us. And because it's our job, not our lives, it's our job. That's something that we can meet with a degree of enthusiasm, professionalism, and consistent results that you as a homeowner who will only go through this process, hopefully once every decade or so, that you do not need to be an expert in all of these things. You can find a team that's going to do that work for you. Okay, sorry, I got a little vehement there. Do we have any questions in the chat? I don't think we do. If anybody wants to add any questions now, you should feel free. And otherwise, you will have our contact information if you want to reach out and have a private conversation. That's something that we do. We do it, and I know Rashida does it in those initial conversations. We do not charge you for those. Those are things that we're happy to do as part of how we build our business. And also, we all feel that an informed public makes this process better for everybody. So the more information that you have as a seller in advance, the easier this process can be for everybody. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's attorneys and real estate agents have terrible reputations, but we work really hard for our people. And the thing that's great about what we do is getting to meet these clients and be part of this process as they go through this transformation in their lives. It is a privilege to be invited into what is an intimate and an emotionally intense part of people's lives. And we try to hold that space really respectfully and never make you feel like you're being taken advantage of. I know I'm speaking for Rashida. Rashida too. Also feels that way. Okay, so I think that's all we have, unless anybody has any additional questions. Thanks so much for joining. And
Yes, you are.
oh, I am talking to you. Okay, good. We will be sharing a copy of this
Um,
recording.
Good night, everyone. Yes.
Sorry, that's it's not a great way to go out, but something just went down the wrong tube. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, please reach out. And Rashida, thank you so much for coming. It's always a pleasure. All right, she's gone. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.